Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker Podcast. My name is Travis Allison from Go Camp Pro and CampMavericks.com.
Hi, my name is Dan Weir. I have over 20 years experience working in camping. I work for YMCA of Long Island, overseeing our day camps, and I've worked in overnight camping for quite some time too.
And my name's Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Weir, and Camp Weir is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains.
My name's Joe Richards, and I'm with Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility, and we're part of the United Church Canada camping movement.
Welcome back to the whole team. Nice to have everybody here. We're recording this on the 13th of May, and our warm-up chat, we all decided that we're had enough of talking about COVID for the moment. So we're going to think about the future. And so our challenge to each other was, what is camp going to be like in 2025? Summer of 2025, what's camp going to be like? And I'll open us up and say, as sick as we are talking about COVID, I think it will still be impacting camp. Hopefully, to my mind, what that means is that we learn some good lessons that are applicable in case of emergency, that we are better prepared for stuff like this, big business interruptions as an industry. We're obviously woefully unprepared for that as a whole. Some camps were ready and just changed modes, and away they went. And I think that a lot to admire there. But I think that there are going to be some positive and negative effects that do carry on. But my hope is that the one thing that camps really take away and are really, really applying in 2025 is a stronger sense of connection between the time that kids and staff leave camp at the end of the summer until the next season. I think that camps, that is one thing I hugely admire that camps have been doing, is really focusing on their online community, really serving their camp families. And I hope that carries through. I think there's a huge potential. And it also just makes our job easier. As a person whose job it is to fill camp, I think it makes our job easier to have that constant connection, a much stronger connection to our families and our staff and our kids between seasons. Dan, do you have a feel for 2025?
Yeah, it's funny. I was on a Zoom call yesterday with coworkers, and I find at the end of the day, the Zoom calls get more negative towards the end of the day. It's just our minds, right? And I tried to boost them up at the end, and I really think a silver lining in 2025 is going to be that parents' expectations of camp are going to be completely redefined. I think that I'm not to phrase the right way. We as an industry got into a contest of who could have the bigger zip line and who could have the wackier inflatable. Yeah. And we just got away from what this experience is. And I think parents need us to teach social skills. I think parents want us to keep their kids safe. And I think you don't need a lot of money to do that, right? Like, you need some good communication, you need some tight procedures, for lack of better words, on keeping the camp safe in all aspects, right? But I think that we're going to see this need for youth like we haven't seen before, in terms of wanting people to just connect. And we're going to see that really demand from parents. So I think we're going to see registration through the roof. I think it's, all those sorts of things that work in that channel. I think that to think that the camp experience is going to be null and void or be disconnected because virtual, because people want that, that's not the case. We're even finding in our own surveys of just several weeks that, most people don't just want the virtual experience. They really just want that as a whole. Yeah.
How about you, Gabz?
I definitely think about connection, and I definitely think about our community, our alumni, and bringing in people and making roles for people that we never thought we could make for certain people. I think coming together as a community, for us to survive this, we're going to have to come together as a community, and we're going to have to pull those individuals in. And I think it can lead to something very, very positive. And I think that as an industry, we're going to have to get a lot better at talking about the good that camps do for children and for our young adults. And I think that it is, I think it's difficult for camp directors. I think not everybody has a marketing mind, but I would say most camp directors that I've met are fairly good storytellers. And I think that my hope is that with this, it's going to push us to talk about the importance and the value, and in the form of a story, in the form of what we do, so people can connect with it, through their hearts, and then show it. Obviously, statistically, always important to back it up, but we're just going to have to get better at it, and not just ourselves, but train our staff and even our campers on the value, and then extend that, of course, to our governments, so that our industry is not something that will be wiped out by this pandemic.
Yeah, that makes sense. Joe?
I think there's so many things and so many great points. I think Camp in 2025 is all of those things that both Dan and Gab have said, and you, Travis. And I think that what else it is from a nonprofit viewpoint is it's reserves, right? One of the things this is highlighted for a ton of nonprofits, not just camps, but nonprofits in general, is if you go around with going hand to mouth with your rates and your donations, anything like this is going to throw you under the bus really fast. And so I think that building reserves, more fundraising, more of the stories for that fundraising as well, Gab, right? Because what's going to come is, I think camps are going to be more expensive. I think they're going to have to be to meet the need, and especially if you're stuck with smaller numbers. And by stuck with, meaning that, there's potential that parents are going to feel safer with a smaller number. So at Waro, I know that there are cabins of 4, which is great. I think that is, but will that be defined? So a cabin of 8, is that something we're going to do? Or there's lots of camps I know that have cabins of 10, 12, right, 17, 20 people in the same building. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to fly anymore in the face of public health. And so I think those smaller numbers, but that will lead to more kids needing scholarships to go to camp, because camp's going to be more expensive. There's going to be fewer of them, thus more fundraising. We've talked internally about the idea that we just change our model a little bit. We've relied on groups coming in the off season to run their own retreats. And what we're going to do is get in on we'll coordinate all of the retreats and just bring in people to teach them, right? Because a lot of people, if somebody loves yoga, they probably don't love the business of trying to market a yoga retreat to people. Or if people love teaching ukulele, they don't like all of the backside and of planning food and planning accommodation, and we can do that. That's logistics we do in our sleep. And so I think that from our end, it's the idea of using our resources to generate income during the time of year when we don't normally generate as much income as we would like.
One thing that comes up for me, and this is something I thought a lot about it maybe 10 or more years ago, when Outward Bound Canada changed their model and they sold off their properties so that they could bring camp to kids, bring the Outward Bound model to kids in the cities. And they really focused on inner city programming. And, I sat with some of the people who helped make that decision at the time. And I thought, it's really smart. Like, those of us that are really focused on this model of, you have to come to this wonderful place in order to have camp. I've heard lots of camp people, and I say this, and I've said it many times myself, I could run a great camp program if I just had the right people with me. I don't need the place. I love the place. And I love lots of your places, the places on this call, I love them. But that maybe this can help us change that. We can get camp to kids instead of kids having to come to us. Even if that's a day camp where it's, a half-hour bus ride to get on, if we can have smaller programs with trusted leaders, I think that also gives us the benefit for those families to get to kids. It's less of a big deal for kids to come to us or get on a program for the day, get on a bus for the day and come to a program, but also allows us to up our impact. and have more trained, capable, conscientious staff leading more programs might be a way that works for more camps, because they're not bound to the property, and we're giving more great staff more opportunities in running smaller programs that are less centralized, and so therefore more flexible. So one of the things I've been thinking a lot about the future of summer camp is how can we be more adaptable, because the songs travel, the games travel, the people travel, but if we're relying on families coming to us, then maybe we're not serving as best we can, and maybe this has been a shakeup enough for our thinking that we could change. If our goal is to serve families and get kids those developmental things that camp does so well, maybe we can get more creative between now and 2025.
And I think that it's, I feel like it, that really frightens people, like, I've mentioned a couple of times, our camp is coming close to 100 years, but what am I serving if we're not there at 104? What are we doing? And I think that there's no harm in daydreaming. There's no harm in bringing a couple of people together and chatting about what if, and really connecting it to your mission and connecting it to, how can you expand? But getting creative, I think, is what's going to be necessary to survive. There's certainly going to be some camps that won't have to budge. They won't have to change very much, and they're going to be okay. But I think for the majority of organizations, we're going to have to ask those scary questions. But just daydreaming and asking, if you're scared of that, then it's okay to be scared of it, but go through it anyways. Go do the exercise, because at one point, we're being faced with it, right now. And there might be some miraculous, wonderful things you're going to find at the other end of that journey that is going to be able to reach youth and your young adults, and training them and bringing quality programming to our campers. What is our mission? What are we trying to do here? And I think we're very skilled at doing that. We can be very creative. But I remember, Travis, you talking about, I think if we don't do that, you're also putting your organization and your kids and your staff at risk. I remember you were talking about a couple of podcasts ago about reading patterns, and that if you were going to, because of climate change right now, if you were going to open up a camp, you would start getting rid of the tents, putting in buildings, because winds are unpredictable, storms are unpredictable. The reality is that things are shifting, things are changing. And so as an industry, we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to read those patterns, and we're going to have to go through the exercise of connecting to our mission and pushing ourselves outside of what we did 20 years ago, 25, 30, 40, 100 years ago. And they change. My camp is definitely not the same camp 100 years ago. No, let's not fool ourselves. We've been changing. So, we have to get out of our own way and ask these tough questions, and you might be pleasantly surprised what you find on the other end. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
Good soapbox. I like it.
I got a story. When I was working at Frost Valley, we really wanted to break into this one neighborhood. We had a good following, but we didn't have a great following there. And we basically, decided to rent a local facility, a local camp, and we ran an overnight camp program at this day camp. And we did it. We brought our staff. We rented the place for the night, and it was great. We had like 40 kids turn out, and we had it was almost all new kids. We didn't know the kids. We knew the staff, but it was almost all new kids. It was through a local Y that we partnered with, and we got a number of those kids to transition into being our full-time campers. So when I look at Camp Cincinnati does this model really well. What they do is they do every week. Gabz nodding as a fellow Bocelli. Every week they do what's called Kids Club. They have a club that kids can basically gather with some mentors. They meet weekly, and then at the end of the year, you get to go to camp if it's your first time. If it's not your first time, you're just part of Kids Club. Like there's a million models that kind of use this. Let's go to your neighborhood and then let's pull you back to our property. And there's hybrids that can work here. You know, you just got to be creative. And it's about knowing your culture, and culture is staff. Like at the end of the day, like, you know, culture is not that zip line. You know, like part of it might be your property and reflecting. Like that is a huge part of what Frost Valley is. It's like this green wall and staring at it, and it's amazing. Green wall being the forest, you know. But you'd be surprised how much of it goes back to just your staff, you know, and keeping that culture intact. You know, that one of the saddest parts of what's going on right now, I've heard, is you know, you might lose a group of CITs if you don't develop them the right way. You know, that's the part that like breaks my heart the most in terms of our industry. But I still think you could still develop them and be creative, and we just need to figure out how to do that as a whole. I just want to comment one other thing. Joe was talking about cash flow. You want a good story to read. The book Shoe Dog is the story of Nike. Regardless of your opinion of Nike and what they do, it's the narrative of how Nike started. And it actually tells a really great story about cash flow. So if you don't have an MBA, or if you got in this because you were really good at singing songs, you know, like you want a book to read right now, I highly recommend the book Shoe Dog. It's by the Nike CEO or former CEO. And it reads really well, but it's a good history, and it is purely a story about cash flow and how Nike was bootstrapping it and crazy stuff. But yeah, it's a good illustration of why cash flow is important.
Yeah, I think that in the end it does come down to that community, right, and the staff and the reputation, because you can run camp anywhere if you have amazing staff and that community. And this is one of the things growing up. Growing up in the United Church camping system in Canada, you start to become staff at 16. And I remember when I became full-time staff for the first time at Canadian Adventure Camp, and you had campers who were 17 and 18 years old, and I was just like, I've had, you know, I was a third-year staff member by the time I was that old. And what it showed, and I think what we might lean back to going is the importance of developing staff to weather a storm like this or like anything in their lives, right? Developing that resiliency and growth mindset in our staff will help your organization move forward. Because if you're going to pivot or be forced to change, you're going to need your staff to be like, oh, that's okay. This goes back. So Mike Sladden at Pathfinder many, many years ago, and he might not remember this, but he said one of the things after he bought Pathfinder was he would stand up and do his morning meditation with them. And he would always, like the second or third day in, he would do, of every session, he would do this morning meditation on why change is part of our culture. And what it does as a new camp owner is it slowly tricks your staff and your campers into believing that any change that is made, well, we're just going to roll with it because it's part of our culture. Versus the camp I was at the time, the Taylor Staton camps, where change was certainly not part of the culture, because, you know, 80 to 90 years in at that point, you're sort of, you know, this is the way we do it. And I think that if this is going to teach us anything, it's going to teach us to be adaptable. And I think in 2025, we're going to get staff who, I think our staff cohort will change as well, right? The reason people come to camp is going to be for that community and for growing more resilient as we go forward. I've always said it, that I would always hire someone who grew up at a camp with nothing and was a staff there than a camp that had high ropes and sailing and canoeing and kayaking. Because you know what you do with a camp that has nothing? You do a lot of programming and creativity and all of those things. You don't rely on the sailing program or the pottery program or the paddle making program. What you're relying on is somebody literally we had a session growing up at camp called Anything Goes, which I talked our program director into, and it was literally 3 of us as program people taking a turn each week and you would just run a session about whatever you wanted. And so like it could be button hunting in the mud forest, right? And you would hide buttons and create a mud puddle and people, right? Or it could be anything, because anything goes. And it was our way of dealing with the idea that that you need to keep people engaged any way you can. So I think that going forward, I think that we'll see a lot more of the small things counting more, right? It's just the way we act and do and interact with people, that community.
Dan, I know you've got something to say, but Joe, I want to jump on anything goes session. One of the best sessions I ever led as a camp counselor in a individual choice period, we used to call them choose your own adventure periods, was invisible skateboard tricks. And that turned into a 2-year obsession for those kids who did invisible skateboard tricks with me. And my friend Sam. And it was in talent shows. It was, super popular from week to week, but yeah, it's just like, just use your brain and make it up. Go down.
All right. So this is a funny story. I was on one of those hiring trips. We go abroad and you end up bonding pretty closely with the people. And so actually on the trip was a camp that was a neighbor. And I had known him for a long time. Camp does not have a lot of money. Just driving by the facilities, it's not great, and so after 6 days together, at the end of it, we were at the bar and I was just like, all right, your camp's a dump, why do you work there? And they proceeded to tell me how they know their camp is a dump, but because that's not their language, it's not their right thing, but you have to imagine I'm a few sheets to the wind at this point. And they go, look, we know the facilities aren't as great as yours, but we all just amps our staff up to give more. And I had this moment of oh wow, it was it really was they took such a huge pride in trying to overcome the challenges that they had that actually brought the staff together. And it goes right into what Joe was saying of you'll take the staff that comes from a camp that has nothing beforehand. And it really goes back to the core of what it was. I worked at Frost Valley long enough where it went in these ups and downs. So I started working there when it was headed downward. And then when I left there, it was heading upward. And I remember when we had nothing. I remember when we had absolutely nothing and doing exactly what we're saying, where the program supply was cardboard and we made it work, and it was wild. But at the same point in time, we created some experiences that when I see these kids now as grown adults, they totally remember everything. It's it doesn't matter, it's just, it's, it doesn't look great in a brochure, but other than that, it's, but who's gonna have print materials in 2025, right? Come on. So, yeah.
So we've talked about staff, we talked about campers. Is there anything physical different that you think will happen in the next 5 years? I think climate change is going to be an interesting one to see how this 3 or 4 months of giving the Earth a break are going to give a lot more implications. People are going to have a greater understanding as things go back to. There's listening to a podcast talking about in a bunch of different cities in Asia where they're seeing the mountains in the background that they haven't seen in 80 to 100 years, and people going back. And that's what happened with the Beijing Olympics, is they cut the air pollution down for the Olympics, and then it went all the way back up right after the Olympics, and all the people in the city are like, wait a minute, hold on. And that was how they got them to change their behaviors and change a lot of those things. So think about that, those kind of implications. Are we seeing things clearly now from a site perspective that we hadn't thought of or seen before?
We've been so the Ys are interesting that they have these facilities as well too, where they're very popular with seniors. So there's a bit of a more aggressiveness with finding out how we could solve this now in terms of screening people. And there's technology that basically I've been told it's in the tens of thousands, but it can literally scan people for fevers when they're walking in the door, 8 to 15 people at a time, and you just walk by it. It's not some people might feel like that's intruding, but I think in the next 5 years, you're going to see that become more commonplace at camps. And you're going to see better policies regarding staffing of going home when you're sick, especially in the States, which I could rant about forever, but that's another 4-hour podcast. So we'll leave that away. But I think you're going to see, and that's the case with any epidemic. It propels health. That's going to be something that we're all going to benefit from in 2025.
Smart. Is that your I got a thought face, Joe? Or
it was, but I have my photo off on the thing, and so finding the unmute button was my. I'm just holding down the mute bar, or the mute bar. That's what this is. It's a mute bar. So yeah, I think that now I've lost that thought. But like the idea of how we screen people. Right? Like we screen people for forever for lice at camp. We screen people health checks have been done for years and years, but never to the degree or speed at which we're going to want them to be done. I think from a physical perspective, a physical site perspective and climate change, I think there'll be changes that happen. And Ferncliff, Joel Gill at Ferncliff said it really well in their announcement that they weren't going to run camp in Arkansas for Ferncliff this year. And he used a biblical reference, the year of Jubilee, which is in biblical times this year of rest and revitalization. And farmers used to have the same premise that you would use a field for so many years and then let it rest for a year to so that it could come back. And I think that some camps, if they don't run this summer and nothing happens, there's a benefit to that in one way to our physical site, right? Like to the grassy areas that always turn into mud pits, or to the zones that, and from a building site, if you can find the money, it's a great time for projects to get done that have never gotten done. But I think that in 25 years from now, right, I was thinking about the idea that social media, which a lot of people think is the end all be all, right? That it's just, well, it's always been here. And you're like, well, but no, it hasn't, right? Like from 2006 backwards, there wasn't really what we have now. And I think that, so looking forward to 2025, what are the changes that are going to happen that are going to, right? Like Twitter just announced that they're going to let all their employees work from home forever. And I'm like, well, but there's a value to seeing someone in your office, right? There's a value to seeing and talking with someone, and not being on a screen and all of those things. So I wonder about if camps can become nature workspaces was one of my thoughts I had recently. The idea that you set up, because we're often not being used Monday through Friday, so you can set up work zones for people to come out and actually work where they can see that wall of green, Dan, right? Where they get the experience without the commitment. Just a thought.
It's clever. I like that a lot. I think that's really smart. Anything else come to mind for you, Gab?
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see more camps taking on an environmental mission. I think, I sort of looking at some of the staff members, if your camp isn't open this summer, looking at some of the staff members and saying, hey, do you all want to self-isolate together? Let's get some work done. And let's brainstorm, let's dream, let's also, paint these cabins. I think that there's opportunities that we can do. I think though that the reality is things are going to change, and they're changing, and I think it's important to start really thinking about what that means to you, and if this is the type of industry you want to be in. And it's okay if you don't want things to change. Maybe this is no longer the right space for you, and that's all right too. But I things are changing and we have to adapt to them, and that's not bad, but it's going to take time. It's going to be tough. And if you have an opportunity of bringing your team together for, 3 weeks, and that's social isolation and nobody leaves and you have the food already, then maybe you can do some dreaming and you bring your staff in that conversation as well. And you can really sort of create a rise of the phoenix type situation. And I think that's possible. And I think that camp people are extremely creative and very resourceful. So I'm interested in seeing where camps are going to go after this summer.
And that, Gab, is a perfect wrap-up space for this discussion. Thank you. So if you're just joining because the topic interested you and you're listening to CampHacker Podcast for the first time, you may not know about our tool of the week. So we ask people who come on as a panelist to bring a tool that makes them a better camp director. Could be inexpensive, could be very expensive. It is up to each of the people, and we've all done stuff at many price points over the years that we've been doing this. For me, I'm going to start off with an app for Slack. Many camps are moving on to Slack to keep the remote teams together. Many people who listen to this will have been in the COVID-19 in camp Slack, because that's now 4,000 people. One of the tools that I really like, just for productivity and getting stuff out there, sometimes I find thumb typing on my phone to be dastardly slow. I'm a pretty good touch typist, and so I'm pretty fast that way, but on my phone it's slow. I love an app that is brought to a company called TalkTalk. And if you go to camphacker.tv/podcast, you can see in the show notes a link to this. It is a voice message app add-on. And we are paying $4 a month for that add-on for Slack. And it allows you to just put in a short code into Slack, and then it'll give you a button to record a voice message to whoever, to a group, etc. And so if you're out and about and you can't stop and type, or you have a thought that you need to get to somebody, it's a nice, easy way to send a voice message. And it's a thing I've been looking for in all of my different chat apps since Dr. Deborah Gilboa introduced me to the idea that Facebook messages have voice recording, and we often use them, Dr. G and I, when we're chatting, or Dr. G and Beth and I when we're chatting, and I just we need that for Slack, and somebody had already built it. So you can find it in the show notes, and you will see the link to that as a Slack app. So that's my tool of the week. Dan, why don't you go next? I know you have to run off, so I'll let you give us your tool, and then I'll invite you to tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to follow up.
Great. So mine's a little complicated, but not. I've also covered it before, but it's just worth it because I'm using it like every hour of every day. So I have basically a tripod hooked up to a Joby phone stand. So Joby, this is what it looks like. It has a little camera piece on it. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to flip it off. So just give me 2 seconds as I do this awkwardly. And then let's rotate that around. So you can see that is right here. This is the part from the Joby. And I took a camera tripod and just hooked it up. And I can't tell you how much that has really saved my phone. One, for my kids dropping it as one of my kids comes into the photo. Yep. And then two, as basically allowing for me to move it anywhere. Yes, this is where I'm going to head out in a second. She's hungry. So, but yeah, so that's worked out well. Travis is laughing way too hard. So pivoting into how you can reach me, you can find me at Dan Loves Camp on Twitter and Instagram. You could also, you can email me at dan.weir@ymca.li, but to be honest with you, the social media is probably more reliable at this point. And that's it. I'm happy to talk camp with anybody. I'm the president of New York State Camp Directors Association, so if you're a New York camp, come talk to me, tell me what's going on, and I will happily tell you what I'm hearing as well too. But that's it. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Dan.
That was awesome. Thanks, Dan.
Gab, what's your tool?
My tool is free, and it's from Team Gantt. Team Gantt is a company that helps you create Gantt charts, and Gantt charts are a way to organize your projects in a timeline that everybody can see and counts the percentages of what needs to get done or what is done and what needs to get done afterwards. So with this time of change, there's a lot of adjusting, adapting. Some people are going to be doing fundraising, different marketing plans. Maybe you're doing, a virtual camp or whatever. There's a lot of organization that needs to be in play. And some of these programs cost money. So Team Gantt actually has a Google Sheets plugin that you can use, and it is absolutely free. And Google Sheets you can share with all of your teammates, and it can really, really help organize your projects and make sure that you've budgeted enough time and money and people space to get those done. So I'm using it right now for all of our different potential scenarios that will be happening for the next couple of months, and I'm able to adjust accordingly, and it's been really a time saver. And it takes time at first to implement, but then once it is, I sleep a little bit better at night. So, and it's free.
Excellent. Gabrielle, how can people get in touch with you if they have follow-up questions? You
can catch me on Instagram at Gabrielle Rail with 2 L's. You can email me at Gabz at Waro, Gabzouareau, and same address, waro.com if you want to check out where I work.
Thanks, Gab.
Thanks.
Awesome. Best tool of the week yet. Are you ready? This might be one of my least expensive tools I've ever recommended. These come in at 40 cents per. And what it's called is the best ever pitcher screw. And if you're watching on YouTube, it doesn't need an anchor. You can literally screw it into any wall, drywall, plaster and lath. I did a couple today, and it leaves about 1/4 inch opening to put a pitcher wire over, or a hook will fit over that as well. When I sell the art that I make, I will often send a couple of these in the package to those people. So because I put the hooks on the back already, and it's just a little thing. I keep a bunch in my drawer so that we can hang random things in and around camp, because a nail sometimes doesn't cut it. And to find an anchor and drill a hole for an anchor and then tap an anchor in, I just get sick and tired. And it's one of those things as you get more into DIY and home improvement, that if you don't know it exists, you think of a harder method. And there are many times during the past 60 days during this COVID lockdown that I've thought I'll be doing something, I'll be like, oh, that's the hard way, right? Like, just stop and go to the easy. I don't need to overthink this. But these are best ever pitcher screw. They're sold by leevalley.com. They have a few different versions. They have something called a bear claw screw and other things. It's just well worth your time if you ever hang pictures in your house. And if you want to follow me or pay attention to me, YoYoJoe, YoYoJoe.com. You can reach me there. You can see what we do here at Pierce Williams at campisbetter.com. And during the past 70 days, I've been more on Facebook and Twitter than I have in the past 3 or 4 years. And you can search for me there. I don't always friend everybody, but if I do, you're lucky. So there you go.
As one of Joe's Facebook friends, I definitely feel lucky. I want to thank the two of you and Dan for being a part of this discussion. I think it's always great for me to have some wise brains to chat about summer camp with. And I want to thank our listeners. I want to thank those people who have been kind enough to sponsor us on Patreon, because that pays for Matt to do our editing. I purposely haven't been charging our patrons the last couple of months, even though we put out a lot of podcasts, because I know that money is tight. But I think those people still deserve some credit for keeping the show alive now for 10 years. And many of those have been with us since we opened up Patreon. And so I want to thank them all for that. That is an amazing thing. One other thing, if you're interested in making a switch to virtual camp programs, if you've made a decision you won't open up this summer and you want to think about virtual and what you can do, then I would encourage you to find the show notes and click on the link there, or go to zoic.ca/notcamp and check out the program that we've created for people to give them a head start in getting their camp programs going. And so it's called Not Camp Camp, and you'll see the link at zoic.ca/notcamp and find out about that program. Thank you very much to those who are watching on YouTube. Thank you to those who have taken us on a dog walk or to wash the dishes. It is always an honor to be a part of your lives. And we, as a team, a Go Camp Pro team, as well as the CampHacker Podcast team, really want to say how grateful we are to have this camp community and be a part of it, and to see the amazing things that camp pros are doing around the world right now in this crisis is truly heartwarming. So thank you all for that. Again, if you want to see our show notes, please go to camphacker.tv/podcast. This is episode 129. If you want to find the links to Joe's fancy picture screw and or our other tools of the week, you can go to camphacker.tv/podcast.
129? What?
Definitely so. Definitely so. All right. So thank you again. I appreciate everybody for listening, for being a part of this. And we look forward to doing stuff again with you quite soon. And thanks for the evening, friends.
Hey, a little thing.